Football. It's simple, not easy. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. And the word of the day is apparently alignment. Yes, alignment. I've read 2 articles so far today on football in general. And that appears to be the secret sauce du jour, the concept of the day coming out of the Super Bowl and into off-season planning for various teams. Ty Dunn wrote an article this morning speaking about specifically how the Seattle Seahawks went about winning the Super Bowl, and 2 big keys popped up out of it. First is alignment, and when he speaks of alignment, he's speaking of alignment between the owner, head coach, and the GM. Now, that alignment typically looks like owner hires the GM, who hires the head coach, and the head coach hires the other coaches, so on and so forth. That alignment, as Ty Dunn puts it, is key to making an organization that from the top down walks to the beat of the same drum, follows the same organization. We can see the opposite of that with the Bills under the Sean McDermott era, where Sean had a contract directly with the owner, as did GM Brandon Beane. Now that has been realigned to be GM Brandon Beane reports to Terry Pegula. New head coach Joe Brady reports to GM Brandon Beane. This is supposedly going to make the Bills much more aligned. Do I think it's going to work in Buffalo? That's a tough question. Brandon Beane was the GM throughout Sean McDermott's 9-year coaching tenure. And don't get me wrong, I keep calling him GM Brandon Beane, my God. Brandon Beane is, despite what people will say on the outside, he's a very good GM. Every GM misses on picks. The draft is by its own design. It is a lottery. You don't always know how a guy is going to go from college to the pros. You just never do. But after 9 years, his own message might be stale. Right? Like he, in his own sort of alignment with his various picks, might be stale. Like his vision for how a team could work might be stale. But I guess we'll see. I don't know. Maybe he was restricted by Sean McDermott's coaching staff. And Joe Brady has overseen an offense that, while the offense has been number one, has made many head-scratching decisions. So what we have to hope now is that instead of this new realignment creating something wonky, it actually creates something. It creates something powerful. That's what we want to see. And that power begins with some of just the basic fundamentals. For example, the head coach has a big impact on just basic fundamentals on both sides of the ball, like tackling. That basic thing you have to do in football where you bring the ball carrier to the ground. Too many times under Sean McDermott, we saw players miss open field tackles at critical moments. Moments where you saw them have a guy wrapped up in the backfield and then somehow their arms fell off. Right? Their arms fell off. They went in for a tackle like this and didn't get the guy on the ground. Basic fundamental of a tackle, as I always learned it, in football specifically. In rugby, it's a little bit different. In football, you put your helmet between the guy's numbers, you wrap up his legs, and you drive to the ground. That's a basic tackle. Now, it gets much harder in the open field. Why is it harder in the open field? Because the offensive player has more places he can go. But you counter that by looking at the guy's center of mass, which is usually right around his belly. You go in for it, and you plant and put on the ground. Too many times under Sean McDermott, we saw tackles being missed in the open field in frustrating and high leverage moments. They missed them all the time against Kansas City in the playoffs, and that's how Kansas City kept getting chunks of yards. That and the zone defense in the back end always had open spots that people could find, it seemed, pretty easily. Now, that being said, the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl this year ran the same sort of defense that Sean McDermott ran, a big nickel, which looks, schematically, it's a 4-2-5 with, strong big boys on the front four. Other fundamentals that Seattle Seahawks mastered in that big nickel, though, was their defensive line play, where their defensive line was able to occupy and take up the entire offensive line such that there was never any need to blitz. There was never any need to bring pressure because the front four could collapse that offensive line and either open up lanes for the linebackers to go and tackle and stop the run, or the cornerbacks or whoever, or the front four on pass plays could easily get pressure because they would just drive the offensive line back. We've talked about it before, how Will Campbell got just absolutely embarrassed in the playoffs and specifically the Super Bowl. Now Will Campbell he'll get better. He's a rookie. We shouldn't pick on him too much. But Seattle's defense was a masterclass in really just the fundamentals of playing the sport on defense. Just defensively, they mastered every single fundamental. I saw them miss, by my count, maybe one open field tackle. It was early in the game, and it was a big whiff. The Patriots got some good yards out of it, but after that point, they swarmed the ball like nobody's business. And the Patriots never got any momentum. They couldn't get going at all. On the flip side, on the offensive side, Clint Kubiak had his offense running their fundamentals like geniuses. The offensive line did a great job of making and sustaining their blocks, and Kenneth Walker running did just a phenomenal job of letting the play develop in front of him. Now, he had time to do that because the offensive line was doing such a good job, but he did a great job, Kenny Walker, of not rushing, not saying, I have to go through this gap, so I'm going to go through that gap whether it's there or not. No, he would get the ball and he'd kind of hesitate for a second, let the play develop, see what's going, and then take off. And he got Super Bowl MVP for his efforts. The Bills on offense were solid, not spectacular in their fundamentals. Solid, not spectacular. And it really came down to the play of, because the offensive line and James Cook cooked. I mean, they created the number one rushing offense in the NFL, and James Cook won the rushing title for a reason. But it really came down to in the pass plays. They were solid, not spectacular. They did a good job, but they didn't always hit their assignment. Receivers often didn't run perfect routes. They ran kind of lazy routes, or they ran, they messed up. And Josh was the same way. He didn't hit all his fundamentals this year. For a guy who has focused so much on improving those and really won MVP the year prior because he did really hit on all his fundamentals. This year was a little bit of a step backward. So we have to hope that Joe Brady, Jim Leonhard, and Pete Carmichael are going to find new and creative ways to hone in on the fundamentals of the team and get them to really focus on those. Today was sort of a boring strategic day talking about the Bills and their offseason. But more news will come in the offseason as we go. As we talked about yesterday, Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb were cut from the Dolphins, and Tua Tagovailoa is on the trading block. Any teams looking for a quarterback with a lengthy concussion history, who's left-handed and who relies on specific timing in an offense, take a flyer on him. Why not? It'll only help the Bills. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.